The squeak of Mike's sneakers was the only sound louder than the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of heavy bags being pummeled in the main gym area. He moved with a practiced grace, even while pushing a heavy cleaning cart. The scent of sweat, leather, and floor cleaner hung heavy in the air, the unique aroma of the Bruise Brothers gym. Mike wasn't there to train. He was there to clean. He wiped down the weight machines, his movements efficient and almost mechanical. Each swipe of the disinfectant was a silent act of service in a place that once held so much promise for him. He paused near the boxing ring, his gaze drawn to the sparring session unfolding inside. Young fighters, full of energy and dreams, danced and weaved, their gloves flashing. A flicker of something, longing, regret, maybe even envy, crossed Mike's face. He quickly looked away, grabbing a discarded water bottle and tossing it into his trash bag. He wasn't supposed to be watching. He was supposed to be working. He remembered a time when he was the one in the ring, the one with the flashing gloves and the roaring crowd. He'd been good, really good. Fast hands, a granite chin, and a heart that wouldn't quit. People had said he was going places. Champions had been mentioned. Now, he was just Mike, the janitor. He continued his rounds, polishing mirrors, scrubbing floors, and emptying trash cans. He tried to ignore the cheers and shouts from the training area, but they seeped into his consciousness, a constant reminder of what he had lost. His eyes, a clear, faded blue, held a weariness that belied his age. He wasn't old, not really. But the years of hard training, followed by the disappointment and the mundane routine, had etched lines around his eyes and mouth. As he moved towards the locker rooms, he noticed a poster on the wall, advertising the upcoming, citywide boxing tournament. A picture of Jake, the Hammer, Harrison, the gym's current star, dominated the poster. Jake was young, cocky, and undeniably talented. Mike felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify, pride? Jealousy? A little of both, perhaps. He sighed and pushed open the door to the men's locker room, the scent of liniment and stale socks assaulting his nostrils. Another mess to clean up. Another day to get through. Another day further removed from the fighter he used to be. He pulled on his rubber gloves, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Even a janitor could dream, couldn't he? The smell of the locker room faded as a different scent filled Mike's mind, the sharp, clean smell of canvas, the metallic tang of blood, the electric anticipation of the crowd. Flash. A younger Mike, maybe 22, bobbed and weaved in the ring, his eyes laser-focused on his opponent. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wave of energy that fueled his every move. He threw a jab, quick and precise, followed by a powerful right hook that landed squarely on his opponent's jaw. The man stumbled, and Mike pressed his advantage, a flurry of punches that sent his opponent crashing to the canvas. Flash. Mike, his face bruised but triumphant, raised his gloved hands in victory. The referee raised his arm higher. The crowd chanted his name, Mikey. 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 He grinned, a genuine, unadulterated smile that reached his eyes. Flash. Training montages, Mike skipping rope with lightning speed, his feet barely touching the ground. Mike pounding the heavy bag, each punch a thunderclap. Mike sparring with his trainer, a grizzled old man named Pops, who offered gruff encouragement and sage advice. Keep your guard up, Mikey. Protect that pretty face. Flash. The turning point. A different fight. Mike, confident and aggressive, went on the attack. He felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, a searing agony that shot down his arm. He tried to ignore it, to fight through it, but the pain was too intense. He lowered his arm, his guard down for a split second. His opponent seized the opportunity, landing a devastating blow that sent Mike reeling. Flash. The doctor's grim face. The words he didn't want to hear: torn rotator cuff. Surgery. At least a year of recovery. Maybe longer. Flash. Months of grueling physical therapy, the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding his strength. The frustration of not being able to punch, not being able to train, not being able to be Mikey, the fighter. Flash. A different kind of pain, the sting of disappointment, the bitterness of unfulfilled potential, the slow erosion of hope. He tried to come back, he really did. But the injury lingered, a constant reminder of what he had lost. He wasn't the same fighter. He was slower, weaker, more hesitant. The flashes faded, leaving Mike standing in the dingy locker room, the scent of liniment and stale socks once again filling his nostrils. The rubber gloves felt heavy on his hands. He was no longer Mikey, the fighter. He was just Mike, the janitor. But somewhere, deep inside, a flicker of that old fire still burned. The last echoes of his past glories faded with the setting sun. As darkness enveloped the city, the Bruise brothers, Jim transformed. The boisterous energy of the day gave way to an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building. Mike waited until he was sure everyone was gone. Mr. Davis, the owner, always double-checked the locks and set the alarm. Once the red light of the security system blinked on, Mike knew it was safe. He slipped out of the locker room, no longer the weary janitor, but something more. He moved to the ring, his sneakers silent on the mat. The moonlight filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows that danced around him like ghostly opponents. He started with simple stretches, loosening his muscles, his movements slow and deliberate. His shoulder ached, a familiar twinge that reminded him of his past. He ignored it. Then, he began to train. He started with shadow boxing, his fists flying through the air, his feet dancing lightly on the canvas. He imagined an opponent in front of him, weaving and dodging, throwing punches, blocking, countering. The movements came back to him with surprising ease, a muscle memory ingrained over years of training. Next, he moved to the heavy bag, unleashing a barrage of punches. The bag swung wildly, absorbing the force of his blows. He focused on his technique, his breathing, his power. Each punch was a release, a way to exorcise the demons of his past, the regrets and disappointments that haunted him. He spent hours honing his skills. Skipping rope until his lungs burned. Doing push-ups and sit-ups until his muscles screamed. Working the speed bag, his hands a blur of motion. He pushed himself to the limit, driven by a force he couldn't explain. He knew it was crazy. He was a janitor, not a fighter. He was too old, too injured, too far removed from the world of boxing. But something inside him wouldn't let him quit. The fire still burned, and he needed to stoke it, to prove to himself that he wasn't finished. These late-night sessions were his secret, his sanctuary. A place where he could be Mikey again, if only for a few hours. A place where he could escape the drudgery of his life and reconnect with the passion that had once defined him. Sometimes, as he trained, he would catch his reflection in the mirror, a glimpse of the fighter he used to be. He would see the sweat-soaked hair, the determined glint in his eyes, the powerful physique that still remained beneath the layers of fatigue and disappointment. And he would smile, a small, secret smile. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a fighter. And he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The next morning, the gym buzzed with a different kind of energy. It was Jake Harrison's energy. Jake, the hammer, was the gym's golden boy, the fighter everyone pinned their hopes on. He was young, brash, and supremely confident, some might even say arrogant. Jake strutted through the gym, his entourage trailing behind him like ducklings following their mother. He slapped backs, exchanged high fives, and generally basked in the attention. He wore a designer tracksuit and diamond stud earrings, a stark contrast to the worn-out equipment and the sweat-stained walls of the Bruise brothers. "Morning, champ," he called out to Mr. Davis, the gym owner, his voice dripping with self-assurance. "Just warming up for another day of dominating." Mr. Davis beamed, puffing out his chest with pride. "That's the spirit, Jake. The city tournament is just around the corner. We're counting on you to bring home the gold. Jake just grinned, flexing his biceps. Don't worry, Mr. Davis. The gold is as good as ours. He climbed into the ring, his movements fluid and powerful. He sparred with his training partner, a tough, experienced fighter who nonetheless seemed intimidated by Jake's presence. Jake moved with lightning speed, his punches sharp and precise. He taunted his opponent, laughing and trash-talking, enjoying the show. Mike, sweeping near the water fountain, watched Jake with a mixture of admiration and disdain. He couldn't deny the kid's talent. Jake was fast, strong, and fearless. But there was something about his arrogance that rubbed Mike the wrong way. He lacked humility, the understanding that success was earned, not given. Jake spotted Mike and smirked. Hey, janitor. Keep the place clean, will ya? Gotta keep it spotless for the champ. Mike just nodded, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything, but inside, he felt a surge of anger. He wanted to tell Jake that boxing was more than just flash and swagger. It was about heart, dedication, and respect. But he knew Jake wouldn't understand. After his sparring session, Jake grabbed a towel and wiped the sweat from his face. He posed for a few photos with fans, signing autographs and making promises to knock out his opponents in the tournament. He was a star, and he knew it. As Jake left the ring, he bumped into Mike, sending his cleaning bucket flying. Water splashed everywhere, soaking Jake's expensive tracksuit. Hey! Watch it, old man! Jake snapped, his face contorted with anger. Mike quickly apologized, grabbing a mop and trying to clean up the mess. Sorry, Jake. Didn't see you there. Jake glared at Mike, his eyes filled with contempt. Just stay out of my way, janitor. You're nothing but a has-been. Mike's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He finished cleaning up the mess, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and resentment. He might be a janitor, but he was more of a man than Jake would ever be. He just needed a chance to prove it. 2 days before the tournament, the gym was electric with anticipation. Jake, as usual, was the center of attention. He was sparring with a new partner, a particularly large and imposing fighter brought in to give him a challenge before the big event. The sparring session started out like any other. Jake was quick and agile, landing punches with precision and ease. But his opponent was relentless, a human wall who kept coming forward, absorbing Jake's blows and returning fire with powerful body shots. Jake started to get frustrated. He tried to end the fight quickly, throwing a series of wild punches, but his opponent was too strong, too experienced. He weathered the storm and continued to press forward. Then, it happened. Jake, trying to create some space, stepped back awkwardly. His ankle twisted beneath him, and he crumpled to the canvas, clutching his leg in agony. A hush fell over the gym. Mr. Davis rushed into the ring, his face etched with worry. Jake! Jake, what's wrong? Jake writhed in pain, his face pale. My ankle. I think I broke it. The gym's trainer examined Jake's ankle, his expression grim. It's bad, Mr. Davis. I think he's right. It's probably broken. Mr. Davis's face turned ashen. No. This can't be happening. The tournament. The sponsors. Everything. Jake was helped out of the ring, his face contorted with pain and disappointment. The gym fell silent, the air thick with despair. Mike, who had been cleaning the weights in the corner, watched the scene unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. He didn't wish Jake any real harm, but he couldn't deny the small part of him that felt a sense of karma. Jake's arrogance had finally caught up with him. Mr. Davis paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. What are we going to do? The tournament is in 2 days. We have no one to replace him. Everything is ruined. The other fighters in the gym looked down, avoiding Mr. Davis's gaze. They knew they weren't good enough to fill Jake's shoes. The tournament was their chance to shine, and now it was gone. Mike watched Mr. Davis's desperation with growing intensity. An idea started to form in his mind, a crazy, impossible idea. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He had been training in secret, honing his skills, preparing for something. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was his chance. He took a deep breath and walked towards Mr. Davis, his heart pounding in his chest. "Mr. Davis," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I can fight." Mr. Davis stared at Mike, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You fight? Are you crazy, Mike? You're a janitor. You haven't fought in years." Mike stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I know, Mr. Davis. But I've been training. I'm ready." Mr. Davis scoffed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Ready? Ready for what? To get knocked out in the first round? This isn't some amateur hour, Mike. This is the citywide tournament. We're talking about serious money, serious sponsors, serious reputations." He paced back and forth, muttering to himself. "Everything is falling apart. All that hard work, all that investment, gone." The other fighters in the gym watched the exchange with a mixture of amusement and pity. They couldn't believe Mike was serious. He was old news, a relic of the past. He had no chance. "Look, Mike," Mr. Davis said, his voice softening slightly. "I appreciate the offer, I really do. But this is just not realistic. You're not in fighting shape. You're old." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got sponsors breathing down my neck, ticket sales are plummeting, and the tournament organizers are threatening to pull our spot. Without Jake, we're nothing." He slumped onto a nearby bench, burying his face in his hands. "This gym, it's my life. It's everything I've worked for. If we lose this tournament, I don't know what will happen." Mike watched Mr. Davis's despair with a growing sense of determination. He knew Mr. Davis was desperate. He was a businessman, and his livelihood was on the line. But Mike also knew that Mr. Davis had a good heart. He cared about the gym, about the fighters, about the community. "Mr. Davis," Mike said, his voice firm. "Give me a chance. Just one chance. Let me show you what I can do. I know I can win this tournament." Mr. Davis looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "What? How?" "I've been training in secret," Mike explained. "I'm in better shape than you think. And I have something Jake doesn't have, experience. I know what it takes to win. I've been there before." He paused, his gaze locking with Mr. Davis's. "Please, Mr. Davis. I'm not asking for much. Just a chance to save your gym." Mr. Davis stared at Mike for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He was weighing his options, desperate for a solution. He knew Mike was a long shot, but he was running out of time and ideas. Finally, he sighed, a weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "All right, Mike," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll give you a chance. But don't let me down." The story already has Mike offering to step in, and Mr. Davis initially dismissing the idea but then reluctantly agreeing. Key points 5 and 6 already cover this plot development. Continuing from the previous point. Mr. Davis's acceptance was less an endorsement and more a last resort. The look on his face said it all, "I'm desperate." "All right, Mike," Mr. Davis continued, his voice regaining some of its earlier edge. "But don't think this is some kind of charity case. You have one day. One day to prove you're not going to embarrass me and this gym. If you can't convince me you're ready, I'm pulling you out, understand?" Mike nodded, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Understood, Mr. Davis." "Good," Mr. Davis said, clapping his hands together. Now, let's get to work. We need to find you some decent gear. And we need to get you cleared by the doctor. And we need a miracle. He turned to the other fighters, who were still watching the scene with a mixture of disbelief and skepticism. Alright, you lot. Back to work. The tournament is still happening, whether you like it or not. And we need to make sure Mike here is in the best possible shape. The fighters reluctantly returned to their training, casting sideways glances at Mike. Some offered words of encouragement, but most just shook their heads, muttering under their breath about how crazy this all was. Mike ignored the doubters. He knew he had a lot of work to do, and he had very little time to do it. He started by going through the gym's old equipment, searching for a pair of gloves that fit and a pair of shoes that weren't completely worn out. Mr. Davis found him a faded old boxing robe, the same one Mike had worn in his prime. Holding the robe in his hands, Mike felt a surge of emotion. It was a reminder of who he used to be, of what he had lost. It's been sitting in storage for years, Mr. Davis said, his voice unusually gentle. I figured you might want it. Mike smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thanks, Mr. Davis. I appreciate it. He put on the robe, and as he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw a flicker of the fighter he once was. The years had taken their toll, but the fire still burned within him. He was ready. The doctor cleared him, albeit with a warning to take it easy. Your shoulder isn't what it used to be, Mike. Be careful out there. Mike just nodded. He knew the risks. But he was willing to take them. This was his chance, his last chance, to prove himself. As he walked back into the gym, he saw Jake sitting on a bench, his leg propped up on a chair. Jake looked up at Mike, his eyes filled with bitterness. So, you're taking my place, huh, janitor? Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Think you can win? Mike stopped in front of Jake, his gaze steady. I'm going to try my best, Jake. For the gym. For Mr. Davis. And for myself. Jake just scoffed. Don't embarrass yourself, old man. You're going to get hurt. Mike didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away, his heart pounding with determination. He had a tournament to win. This key point is also redundant. Key points 6 and 7 already cover Mr. Davis's reluctant agreement. Continuing from the previous scene. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Mr. Davis, despite his lingering doubts, threw himself into preparing Mike for the tournament. He arranged for a crash course in strategy with Pops, Mike's old trainer. Alright, Mikey, Pops rasped, his voice still gravelly after all these years. It's been a long time. But the basics are still the same. Protect yourself. Exploit their weaknesses. And never, ever give up. Pop studied fight footage of Mike's potential opponents, identifying their strengths and weaknesses. He devised a game plan that emphasized Mike's experience and ring smarts, compensating for his diminished speed and power. You can't outmuscle these young punks, Mikey, Pop said. You gotta outsmart them. Use your head. Make them pay for their mistakes. Mike listened intently, absorbing Pop's wisdom. He knew he couldn't rely on brute force. He needed to be strategic, to use his experience to his advantage. Mr. Davis also worked on damage control. He contacted the tournament organizers, explaining Jake's injury and introducing Mike as his replacement. The organizers were skeptical, but Mr. Davis pleaded with them, promising that Mike would put on a good show. He also had to deal with the sponsors, who were furious about Jake's injury. Mr. Davis assured them that Mike was a worthy replacement, a seasoned veteran who would bring excitement and drama to the tournament. Meanwhile, Jake sat on the sidelines, his face a mask of bitterness. He watched Mike train with a mixture of resentment and disbelief. He couldn't believe that the old janitor was actually going to take his place in the tournament. He limped over to Mr. Davis, his voice laced with sarcasm. So, you really think he can do it, Mr. Davis? You really think the old man can win? Mr. Davis sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't know, Jake. But we don't have any other choice. We're stuck with him. Jake shook his head, a sneer on his face. He's going to embarrass you, Mr. Davis. He's going to embarrass this gym. You're making a big mistake. Mr. Davis just shrugged. Maybe you're right, Jake. But maybe, just maybe, he'll surprise us all. As the day wore on, the atmosphere in the gym shifted. The initial skepticism began to fade, replaced by a grudging respect for Mike's dedication and determination. The other fighters started to offer words of encouragement, recognizing the underdog spirit that was driving him. Even Jake seemed to soften a little, his anger giving way to a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the old janitor could pull off the impossible. As the sun began to set, Mike stood in the ring, his body aching, his mind focused. He had given it his all. He was ready. Mr. Davis clapped him on the back, a rare show of affection. Good luck, Mike, he said, his voice filled with genuine emotion. Win or lose, I'm proud of you. Mike nodded, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew he was facing an uphill battle. But he was ready to fight. For the gym. For Mr. Davis. And for himself. He was ready to prove that even an old janitor could still dream. The previous text already contained a training sequence, so this section will expand on the mental and emotional aspects of Mike's preparation. Mike's training wasn't just about physical conditioning. It was about mental fortitude, about rediscovering the fire that had once burned so brightly within him. It was about confronting his past, his failures, and his fears. He sparred with younger, faster fighters, taking punches, absorbing blows, learning to adapt and overcome. Each hit was a reminder of his age, his injuries, his limitations. But each hit also fueled his determination, reminding him of what he was fighting for. He spent hours meditating, clearing his mind, focusing on the task ahead. He visualized his opponents, studying their movements, anticipating their attacks. He practiced his footwork, his punches, his defense, honing his skills until they became second nature. He revisited old fight tapes, watching his younger self in action, analyzing his strengths and weaknesses. He remembered the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, the lessons he had learned along the way. He talked to Pops, pouring out his heart, sharing his doubts and fears. Pops listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and wisdom. You gotta believe in yourself, Mikey, Pops said. You gotta remember who you are. You're a fighter. It's in your blood. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do this. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old, too slow, too washed up. You're still Mikey, the fighter. And you're gonna show them all what you're made of. Mike took Pop's words to heart. He started to believe in himself again. He started to see himself not as a janitor, but as a fighter. He started to feel the fire burning within him, stronger than ever before. He thought about his past, about the dreams he had abandoned, about the opportunities he had missed. He thought about his future, about the chance to prove himself, to inspire others, to make a difference. He thought about Mr. Davis, who had given him a chance when no one else would. He thought about the gym, which had been his home for so many years. He thought about the community, which had always supported him. He knew he couldn't let them down. He knew he had to give it his all. He had to fight with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed. He trained harder than ever before, pushing his body to its limits, fueled by his past and the opportunity. He ran until his lungs burned, he punched until his knuckles bled, he sparred until his body ached. He refused to give up. He refused to quit. He refused to let fear and doubt control him. He was Mikey, the fighter. And he was ready to fight. He was ready to win. As the day drew to a close, Mike stood in the ring, his body exhausted, his mind clear. He had done everything he could. He was ready for the tournament. He was ready to face his fears. He was ready to prove himself. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "I can do this." Despite Mike's renewed confidence and rigorous training, the air surrounding him remained thick with doubt. On the morning of the tournament, the gym felt less like a training ground and more like a waiting room for a disaster. The other fighters tried to be supportive, but their words often came out as thinly veiled pity. "Good luck out there, Mike," they'd say, followed by a hesitant, "Just, be careful." Their eyes betrayed their true feelings, "He's going to get killed." Even Pops, despite his unwavering encouragement, couldn't hide his concern. "Remember the game plan, Mikey," he'd say, his voice tight with worry. "Don't try to be a hero. Just survive." Mr. Davis was a nervous wreck. He paced back and forth, wringing his hands, muttering about ticket sales and sponsor obligations. He kept glancing at Mike with a look that said, "Please don't let me down." Jake, still sidelined with his injury, watched Mike with a cynical eye. "You're making a fool of yourself, old man," he'd sneer. "You're going to get knocked out cold, and everyone's going to laugh at you." The local news even ran a segment on the tournament, highlighting Jake's injury and Mike's unlikely participation. The reporter framed it as a feel-good story, but the underlying message was clear, asterisk an over-the-hill janitor trying to recapture his youth. What a joke star. The skepticism extended beyond the gym walls. Online forums buzzed with comments mocking Mike's chances. "Who's this old geezer?" one commenter wrote. "He's going to get destroyed." Another added, "This is just a publicity stunt. They're trying to drum up interest by exploiting the old guy's story." Even Mike's friends and family expressed their concerns. "Are you sure about this, Mike?" his sister asked, her voice filled with worry. "You haven't fought in years. You could get seriously hurt." Mike tried to ignore the doubts and skepticism, but they seeped into his mind, planting seeds of insecurity and fear. He started to question himself. Was he making a mistake? Was he too old, too slow, too washed up? Was he just embarrassing himself and everyone he cared about? As he prepared for his first fight, he looked in the mirror and saw not a fighter, but an old man with a tired face and a worn-out body. He saw the doubts reflected in his own eyes. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to remember Pop's words, asterisk "You're still Mikey, the fighter. And you're gonna show them all what you're made of star." He opened his eyes, and the doubts began to fade. He was still Mikey, the fighter. And he was ready to fight. He was ready to prove them all wrong. He walked out of the locker room, and stepped into the arena. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wall of sound that washed over him. He scanned the faces, searching for Mr. Davis, Pops, and even Jake. He saw them all, their expressions a mixture of hope and apprehension. He took a deep breath and focused on his opponent, a young, muscular fighter with a confident swagger. The kid looked like he was ready to run through a wall. The bell rang, and the fight began. Mike started cautiously, feeling out his opponent, testing his reflexes. The kid came out swinging, throwing a flurry of punches, trying to overwhelm Mike with his speed and power. Mike used his experience to his advantage, dodging punches, blocking blows, conserving his energy. He let the kid tire himself out, waiting for an opening. In the second round, Mike started to turn the tide. He used his jab to control the distance, keeping the kid at bay. He mixed in body shots, slowing the kid down, wearing him down. The crowd started to get behind Mike, chanting his name, Mikey. 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 They were surprised by his skill, his determination, his resilience. They were rooting for the underdog. In the third round, Mike saw his opportunity. The kid was getting sloppy, dropping his guard. Mike unleashed a powerful right hook that landed squarely on the kid's jaw. The kid stumbled, his eyes glazed over. Mike followed up with a series of punches, driving the kid back against the ropes. The referee stepped in, stopping the fight. Mike had won. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting his name even louder. Mr. Davis jumped up and down, his face beaming with joy. Pops pumped his fist in the air, his eyes filled with pride. Even Jake cracked a smile. Mike had surprised everyone. He had proven that he still had what it took. He had won his first fight in years. But the tournament wasn't over. He had to fight his way through several more rounds to reach the championship. His next opponent was a tough, experienced fighter with a reputation for being a knockout artist. The fight was a grueling back-and-forth battle, with both fighters taking a beating. Mike used his ring smarts to survive, weathering the storm, capitalizing on his opponent's mistakes. He managed to eke out a narrow victory, winning by decision. His third opponent was a fast, agile fighter with a tricky style. Mike had to adjust his strategy, using his footwork to cut off the ring, trapping his opponent in corners. He won that fight too, but he was starting to feel the effects of the tournament. His body was aching, his muscles were sore, his shoulder was throbbing. He knew he couldn't keep fighting like this. He needed to find a way to conserve his energy, to end the fights quickly. He needed a knockout. As he prepared for his next fight, he knew he was facing his biggest challenge yet. He was tired, battered, and bruised. But he was also more determined than ever before. He had come this far. He wasn't going to give up now. He was ready to fight his way to the championship. He was ready to prove that even an old janitor could still win. The tournament continued, and with each fight, the stakes rose higher. Mike's journey became a captivating narrative, an against-all-odds story that resonated with the crowd. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for the gym, for Mr. Davis, for the underdog in everyone. His opponents were a diverse mix of talent and styles, each presenting a unique challenge. There was the Cyclone, a whirlwind of punches and footwork, forcing Mike to rely on his defense and counterpunching skills. Then came the Brick Wall, a relentless brawler who tested Mike's endurance and resolve. Each victory was hard-earned, pushing Mike to his absolute limit. Between rounds, Pops worked tirelessly, tending to Mike's bruises and offering words of encouragement. Mr. Davis paced nervously, his anxieties amplified with each passing fight. Jake, surprisingly, became a vocal supporter, offering tactical advice and even a few words of praise. The news coverage intensified, transforming Mike from a local curiosity into a national sensation. His story was splashed across newspapers and television screens, inspiring people from all walks of life. The gym was flooded with well-wishes and donations, a testament to the power of his improbable journey. But the success also brought added pressure. Mike knew that the expectations were growing, that everyone was counting on him to win. The weight of responsibility threatened to crush him, but he refused to succumb to the pressure. In the semi-final bout, Mike faced his toughest opponent yet, the Viper, a cunning and elusive fighter known for his lightning-fast strikes and his ability to exploit his opponent's weaknesses. The Viper was younger, faster, and stronger than Mike. He danced around the ring, taunting Mike, landing punches at will. Mike struggled to keep up, his body aching, his mind racing. The Viper started to target Mike's injured shoulder, exploiting his weakness. Mike gritted his teeth, fighting through the pain, refusing to give up. In the final round, Mike was on the verge of collapse. He was exhausted, battered, and bruised. The Viper was circling him, ready to deliver the knockout blow. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Mike saw an opening. The Viper dropped his guard for a split second, overconfident, arrogant. Mike seized the opportunity, unleashing a desperate right hook, a punch fueled by years of frustration and a lifetime of dreams. The punch landed squarely on the Viper's jaw, sending him crashing to the canvas. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices deafening. Mike had done it. He had reached the championship. But his toughest challenge still lay ahead. He was about to face the reigning champion, a formidable and intimidating fighter known as the Mauler. The suspense was palpable. The entire city was holding its breath, waiting to see if the old janitor could pull off the impossible. The arena was packed, the atmosphere electric. Every seat was filled, every eye focused on the ring. The air crackled with anticipation. This was it, the championship fight. The moment everyone had been waiting for. Mike stood in his corner, his body weary, his spirit strong. He looked across the ring at his opponent, the Mauler, a mountain of a man with a shaved head, a menacing glare, and a reputation for destroying anyone who dared to stand in his way. The Mauler was the reigning champion, undefeated for 3 years. He was known for his raw power, his relentless aggression, and his iron chin. He was the favorite, the one everyone expected to win. Mike knew he was the underdog. He knew he was facing an uphill battle. But he refused to be intimidated. He had come too far, fought too hard, to give up now. He looked at Mr. Davis, who was pacing nervously in his corner. He saw Pops, who gave him a reassuring nod. He even saw Jake, who offered a rare smile. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and focused on the task ahead. He remembered Pop's words, *protect yourself. Exploit their weaknesses. And never, ever give up. Star. The announcer introduced the fighters, building the suspense to a fever pitch. The crowd roared, their voices shaking the very foundations of the arena. The Mauler glared at Mike, his eyes filled with contempt. "You don't belong here, old man," he growled. "You're going to get hurt." Mike didn't say anything. He just stared back at the Mauler, his expression unwavering. He was ready. The bell rang, and the fight began. The Mauler came out swinging, unleashing a barrage of punches, trying to overwhelm Mike with his size and power. Mike dodged and weaved, using his footwork to stay out of range. The Mauler landed a few blows, powerful shots that shook Mike to his core. Mike stumbled, but he refused to fall. He knew he couldn't afford to get knocked down. Mike started to implement Pop's game plan, using his jab to control the distance, frustrating the Mauler, forcing him to chase him around the ring. The Mauler grew impatient, throwing wild punches, leaving himself open. Mike seized the opportunity, landing a sharp counterpunch that snapped the Mauler's head back. The crowd gasped, surprised by Mike's speed and precision. The Mauler was stunned, but he quickly recovered. The fight settled into a grueling back-and-forth battle, with both fighters trading blows. Mike used his experience to his advantage, conserving his energy, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Mauler continued to rely on his power, trying to wear Mike down. He landed several more heavy shots, but Mike refused to break. He absorbed the punishment, showing the heart of a champion. As the fight wore on, the Mauler started to tire. His punches became slower, his movements more sluggish. Mike sensed his opportunity. He knew he had to take advantage of the Mauler's fatigue. He had to end the fight before it was too late. The championship was within reach. The championship fight raged on, a brutal dance of skill and endurance. Rounds blurred into a tapestry of sweat, blood, and determination. The Mauler, fueled by raw power, relentlessly pursued Mike, attempting to overwhelm him with sheer force. Mike, relying on years of experience, weaved and dodged, absorbing the blows, conserving his energy, and waiting for his chance. Each round brought new challenges. The Mauler's punches landed with bone-jarring force, testing Mike's resilience. Mike's counter-punches, though less powerful, were precise and strategic, disrupting the Mauler's rhythm and chipping away at his confidence. The crowd was on its feet, chanting Mike's name, urging him to keep fighting. They were witnessing something extraordinary, an old janitor, defying the odds, battling the seemingly invincible champion. In the middle rounds, Mike began to target the Mauler's body, landing stinging jabs and hooks to the ribs. The Mauler, accustomed to dominating his opponents, grew visibly frustrated. His punches became wilder, his movements less precise. Mike, sensing the shift in momentum, pressed his advantage. He used his footwork to create angles, trapping the Mauler in corners. He unleashed a flurry of punches, testing the Mauler's chin. The mauler absorbed the blows, his iron jaw holding firm. But Mike could see the fatigue in his eyes, the weariness in his movements. He knew the mauler was starting to break. In the later rounds, the fight became a battle of wills. Both fighters were exhausted, battered, and bruised. Their bodies ached, their lungs burned, their minds screamed for relief. The mauler continued to rely on his power, throwing haymakers that whistled past Mike's head. Mike continued to counterpunch, landing sharp blows that kept the mauler at bay. The crowd grew silent, their anticipation reaching a fever pitch. They knew the fight could end at any moment. They knew that one punch could decide the championship. Mike, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed, refused to give up. He remembered his past, his dreams, his reasons for fighting. He remembered Mr. Davis, Pops, and the gym that had given him a second chance. He fought with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed, fueled by his heart and his determination. He was Mikey, the fighter. And he was going to fight until the very end. He saw the mauler, his face contorted with exhaustion and frustration. He saw an opening, a split-second opportunity to strike. He knew he had to take it. He had to give it everything he had. The championship was within his grasp. The culmination was near. He saw the mauler telegraph his punch, a wild haymaker born of desperation and fatigue. It was slow, clumsy, and predictable. It was the opening Mike had been waiting for. Time seemed to slow down. Mike saw the punch coming, analyzed its trajectory, and calculated his response. He ducked under the punch, avoiding the blow by a hair's breadth. As the mauler stumbled forward, off balance, Mike seized the opportunity. He coiled his body, channeling all his remaining strength into a single, devastating punch. It was a right uppercut, a punch he had perfected over years of training. A punch that had won him countless fights in the past. A punch that he hoped would win him this fight. The punch connected with the mauler's chin, a thunderous impact that reverberated through the arena. The mauler's eyes rolled back in his head, his body went limp, and he crashed to the canvas like a felled tree. The arena erupted. The crowd roared, their voices deafening. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The old janitor had knocked out the reigning champion. He had won the tournament. The referee rushed over to the mauler, checking his pulse. He signaled to the ringside doctor, who quickly attended to the fallen fighter. The referee then turned to Mike, raising his arm in victory. The winner, he announced, his voice barely audible above the roar of the crowd, and new champion. Mikey. Mike stood in the center of the ring, his body aching, his face bruised, his heart soaring. He had done it. He had pulled off the impossible. He had defeated the champion. Mr. Davis rushed into the ring, embracing Mike, his face wet with tears. "You did it, Mike. You did it. You saved the gym." Pops followed close behind, clapping Mike on the back, his eyes filled with pride. "I knew you could do it, Mikey. I always knew you had it in you." Even Jake limped into the ring, offering a grudging handshake. "Not bad, old man," he said, a hint of respect in his voice. "Not bad at all." Mike looked around at the cheering crowd, their faces filled with admiration and gratitude. He had inspired them. He had given them hope. He had proven that anything is possible, if you believe in yourself and never give up. He raised his arms in victory, acknowledging the cheers of the crowd. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a champion. He was Mikey, the fighter. And he had proven that even an old dog could learn new tricks. The victory was sweet. The redemption, complete. The days that followed were a whirlwind of celebrations and accolades. Mike became an instant celebrity, his story inspiring millions around the world. He was interviewed on television, featured in magazines, and even received a key to the city. But the greatest reward was the outpouring of love and support from his community. The Bruise Brothers gym became a hub of activity, filled with well-wishers, aspiring fighters, and grateful members who had been touched by Mike's story. Mr. Davis, beaming with pride, couldn't stop singing Mike's praises. "I always knew he had it in him," he'd say, though everyone knew he had been one of the biggest skeptics. "He's a true inspiration, a testament to the power of hard work and determination." He held a special ceremony in the gym, renaming it Mikey's Gym in honor of its unlikely champion. He presented Mike with a framed portrait, a permanent reminder of his incredible achievement. Jake, his leg still in a cast, became Mike's biggest fan. He apologized for his earlier arrogance and offered to help Mike train the next generation of fighters. "You showed me what it really means to be a champion, old man," Jake said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's not about the money or the fame. It's about the heart, the dedication, and the willingness to never give up." Mike used his newfound platform to give back to the community. He started a foundation to support underprivileged youth, providing them with access to education, healthcare, and athletic training. He also became a vocal advocate for senior citizens, encouraging them to pursue their dreams and never let age be a barrier to success. But the most meaningful moment came when Mike received a letter from his old trainer, Pops. Pops, who had been struggling with health issues, expressed his pride and gratitude. "You made me believe in miracles again, Mikey," Pops wrote. "You showed the world that anything is possible, if you have the courage to chase your dreams. You're a true champion, both inside and outside the ring." Mike framed the letter and hung it in his office, a constant reminder of the importance of mentorship and the power of human connection. He had achieved redemption, proving everyone wrong and inspiring countless others along the way. He was no longer just a janitor, a forgotten fighter, or a washed-up has-been. He was a champion, a hero, and a symbol of hope. The town held a parade in his honor. Banners flew, children cheered, and Mike, the former janitor, waved from the back of a convertible, a true hometown hero. He had come full circle, reclaiming his past and embracing his future. He had found his purpose, his passion, and his place in the world. He was finally at peace. He had become the man he was always meant to be. His story would be told for generations to come. The local library created a special section just for books and articles about him. He was a legend. Years passed. Mikey's Gym thrived, becoming a beacon of hope and inspiration in the community. The walls were adorned with photographs of Mike, his championship belt proudly displayed in a glass case. Mike, no longer a janitor, had embraced his new role as a respected fighter and trainer. He dedicated his life to helping others achieve their dreams, sharing his wisdom and experience with aspiring boxers. He worked closely with Jake, who had recovered from his injury and become a skilled trainer in his own right. Together, they created a dynamic duo, mentoring young fighters and instilling in them the values of hard work, dedication, and respect. Mike's training sessions were legendary. He pushed his students to their limits, challenging them to overcome their fears and doubts. He taught them the importance of discipline, perseverance, and sportsmanship. He often shared his own story, reminding them that anything is possible, if you believe in yourself and never give up. He showed them that age is just a number, and that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. He became a father figure to many of his students, providing them with guidance, support, and a sense of belonging. He helped them navigate the challenges of life, both inside and outside the ring. He continued to give back to the community, volunteering his time and resources to various charitable organizations. He never forgot where he came from, and he always remembered the people who had helped him along the way. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the windows of Mikey's Gym, Mike stood in the ring, watching his students spar. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He saw a young fighter, a skinny kid with a determined look on his face, struggling to land a punch. Mike stepped into the ring, offering words of encouragement and advice. "Remember what Pops always said," Mike told the kid. "Protect yourself. Exploit their weaknesses. And never, ever give up." The kid nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. He stepped back into the ring, his movements more confident, his punches more precise. Mike watched him, his heart filled with pride. He knew the kid had the potential to be a champion. He knew that he could help him achieve his dreams. He looked around at the gym, at the faces of his students, at the photographs on the wall. He realized that he had finally found his purpose. He had found his place in the world. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and smiled. He was at peace. The gym doors opened, letting in a shaft of sunlight. The faint scent of cleaning fluid hung in the air, a reminder of where he started. But now, the scent was accompanied by the smell of sweat and leather, the smell of victory. Mike, the former janitor, the champion, the trainer, was home. The bell rang, signaling the end of the round. Mike watched his students leave the ring, a peaceful expression on his face. His life was complete.